Allow me to greet you in our local language. Nabaluwal go ti daumin or gawisay agaw ta kung amin. Before I will start, I'd like to say thank you so much for this opportunity to share one of the studies that I did in Abra. Because I'm from Abra and I belong to the 𝐸𝐻𝐸 group, specifically the Adasen subgroup of Tingyan or 𝐸𝐻𝐸. Medyo makapanervyos gam no ti sarsaron wumkot ni Ma'am Briggs. Taawan ti PowerPoint na everything else was based on experience and all. But I'll try to do my best as well to share to you whatever the things that I've learned when I had the research or the study. Before proceeding to discussing everything, let me inform everyone that the term SANGO is a very familiar term. For Ilocano, agsasango tayo, right? But the SANGO of Ilocano does not require anything else to resolve. It's just that agsasango kayo or agis istorya kayo, like just this. But among the Adasen of Abra, when we call it SANGO, it involves a certain problem that needs to be resolved. So this term might have been borrowed in the distant past because knowing Abra, it's also divided into two groups of people. We have the Ilocanos mostly occupying the lowland areas and the 𝐸𝐻𝐸gs, the upland areas. Of course, not to mention colonization in that particular period. In Abra, we have a lot of ethno-linguistic groups, and Adasen is just one of them. It's located on the northern part of Abra. The Adasen occupied the entire area of Tinag, the largest municipality of Abra, some parts of Lagayan, where I came from, and of course from Tinag as well, and 3 certain barangays in Lagangilang, Abra. So those are the areas where the Adasen resides. All right, sir, kindly. So just to give you a little background about this, problems or conflicts have always been a part of our lives. Just like what Ma'am Briggs mentioned earlier, there are still problems, whether that's related to politics or even land, as mentioned earlier. In a community where we always believe that's guided by social facts and then social actors, there will always be conflicts. Like, no dati nagtakaw tinuang, siyay, nagdadaal ti mula, those are conflicts in a certain community that actually do not need, supposedly, a lawyer to resolve them. That is why we always put premium to the value of indigenous knowledge, not just in economics, but also in leadership and governance. That's, I think, is the very reason why we are here to do the Ap-apat. Or in our language, Ap-apat or telling story with other people is exactly translated as amlang, right? Panaga-amlang, which I used when I gathered my data. I did the amlang to the elders of our community, right? So, sige lang sir, just proceed. I'll just go along anyway. So it's not new to us here in Cordillera. If we have read the Traditions and Transformation book authored by Ma'am June Frilbrecht, we would have encountered a lot of the different ways on how to resolve conflicts in an indigenous way. For example, the last paragraph there, okay, so they are facilitated by our elders. Although in Abra, they always refer to them as lalakay. Okay? Makikita po natin yung Ilocano influence ng term. Although we also refer to them as manmanakom or manmanakman. Just like in Kalinga, they also have in Buntok, the amam'a or nanakay, all of those things, right? And then these elders will come up with a certain way or the conflict resolution itself, which they will now call in Benguet, tungtungan, right? In Buntok, I heard of Pechen. In Kalinga, I heard of Budong. Also, Abra has Budong. But since my topic was just limited in a community, we use the SANGO. Because I clarified this already to some of the elders in Abra, when we say Budong, it includes inter-villages conflicts that we need to resolve. but the conflict that existed or are existing only in the community, it should just be by SANGO, according to them. That's our conflict resolution. Now we know that we have the M𝐚𝐫𝐤 J𝐨𝐬𝐡𝐮𝐚 Kamunglan, the Apu, all of them. That's why we have to always value the knowledge being introduced or given to us, passed down to us by our ancestors. Kaya ang laging joke ko sa klase, tignan mo yung katabi mo. Ano kayang magandang sasabihin yan sa'yo? Compared mo, pag umuwi ka doon sa ili ninyo or in your community and talk to some elders there. They keep laughing. Kasi dan gamit itong tunganda nga, pantay ka magpaspasyar ng malpasti klase kung kunada. Those are the conversations that you usually hear inside the classroom. And it's a good thing that we do some researches and forums such as this for us to be enlightened about the real value or the very essence of our IKSP. All right. Next po. All right, so I just determined 3 actually. Here, for me to understand the entire SANGO system, we decided to look at how do they qualify members of the SANGO who are supposed to be the member of the SANGO. And then the second one, what are the cases resolved under the jurisdiction of the SANGO by the elders or the lalakay? And then, what are the different conflicts, and then how the processes on how they are being resolved from before, during the SANGO or the conflict resolution, and then after the conflict resolution. Let's move on, sir. All right, so this is the place which I think is the only barangay in Lagayan where you could really see the Adasen, because other parts of Lagayan mostly are in Laod, Itnug. Those that would trace the origin from the area of Ilocos Norte. It's also quite the same with Kankanay because they use umali kayo and all. But for us, it's quite different for Tinug and then Pai in Lagayan, Abra. Thank you po. I think I have it here. Now, for my conceptual framework, although this is not an IRM, right? This is not really an indigenous way of looking things because I still made use of a Western perspective to understand them. So please forgive me about that. I used here functionalist perspective. When we're talking about functionalism, it always views the society as a system of interconnected parts. You have the social facts, and then you have the social actor. One good example that we could probably talk about is the idea of inayan being a social fact. And you have social actors, the members of the community. When you have with you your social facts, people in the community are warned about what they're supposed to do or what they're not supposed to do. But because there are some individuals who always try, or at some point in their lives, probably with different circumstances, they disobeyed a certain social fact, it will create conflict. That's why here, you could see, if you imagine the entire circle, that's not a donut though, okay? If you could imagine the circle as the community, at the center, at the middle of it, you could see social actors. These are people in the community, right? So you just imagine this, and in a certain community, we could not avoid conflict because of different interests. Right? Now, if there is no conflict, there is social order. But since from social actors, there will be conflict, and then later on, we need to address the conflict through conflict resolution. But I made use of the idea of integration taken from the functionalism theory, where I stands for integration. A for adaptation, G for goal attainment, and letter L is for latency. But I only specifically applied or used integration as a way for me to frame or guide the study. So integration, therefore, involves how social justice works in a certain community or in a system. Now, so we apply this one during the conflict resolution. Once a conflict has been resolved, it goes back to social order in the community. But then and again, if will be another conflict arising soon, we will create another conflict, and it is just circulating. It is just a matter of trying to sustain the stability of social order in the area, but there are some unavoidable circumstances creating conflict, so we move on to resolve them within ourselves through the guidance of our elders without going through the courts, right? So this is actually very interesting because I have witnessed some before when I was still there, just that I did not really take my interest before to capture or record them, write about them. It was only when I was studying in Baguio and then later on here at Benguet State University that I realized the significance or relevance of all of these things. So now we move on to answer later on the first question, what qualifies them? I really had to travel to different sitios because we have at least 6 sitios in our barangay, and the setup in Bai is not like the setup of Mountain Province where this is another place and this place has another name already, even if the distance just here and there. In Abra, it's different. If this is one sitio, you would have at least to probably walk 40 minutes or 30 minutes before you will reach another sitio. So you really had to go through different pathways or you climb mountains just for you to reach them. Now, when I was interviewing the members, by the way, the members of this study were the elders. And I would like now to clarify that there is an existing group of lalakay for SANGO, and there is a different one as provided by our local government code of 1991, the Lupong Tagapamayapa. I asked them the very first question, why did you not just unite so that at least, anyway, we have the barangay chairman? And the answer I received from the head, the ulu of the SANGO system was very simple. If that is a barangay chairman, he has been voted there, it means there is politics involved. As for the SANGO, we might not receive what they are receiving, such as allowance, honorarium, whatsoever, but we are here to maintain the social order of the society, of the community. And that is the very reason why we have the SANGO as a separate institution from that of the Lupong Tagapamayapa. So that's I must put or emphasize that because sometimes elders now are often regarded as Lupong Tagapamayapa. Right? And their chairman is the barangay chairman is their head, with some other members, although the one who will be choosing would be the barangay captain who will appoint some of them. But here, the one who will be appointing them is the dadaulo. But you have to meet certain qualifications. I'm going to preempt you right now. It does not necessarily mean that if you have the 3 and you lack the other one, you are not qualified to be a member. But the most important there is that the idea of nalintag. First, nalayang amiris or they know how to analyze. When I was talking to the elders, they were saying, it's really required, supposedly, that a person who will try and decide a case is knowledgeable about how the culture must go and the process and how to balance everything during the conversation. And the next one mentioned was nalintog. We have to make sure that he has no record in the barangays. Uray pa nagtakaw lang ti may sanga sa baday ta, he should have no record in the barangay. Otherwise, it disqualifies the very purpose of modeling yourselves to maintain social order in the community. And the next one is, we call it nginangadi. We have kaugalyan, the kadaanan or kadkadawyan. But in our language, we call it nginangadi. Dagijay talaga nga nabayab-bayag, they refer to it nginangadi. Kadawyan, kung nadano, dagijay lang, kasi nood na baon, we call it nginangadi. Right. Nalaing ko nginangadi, when I was talking to them, one could not be a leader if one does not know the culture. How we would implement or resolve a case here if you are not even aware about the culture. It should not just be about your knowledge of resolving the case. Your knowledge of culture should come across with the different aspects of the community or tenets of the community. You should know some about your indigenous practices economically. You should know some about your indigenous practices when you have wedding, death, and burial, aside from your knowledge supposedly in resolving conflicts. So medyo broad po siya. And then the last one is panakibulbulon, or every time there is an occasion or trials in the community, you should appear. 𝕸𝕐𝕐𝕐𝕐𝕐, you should lead them by example. Those are things that came out as I thematically analyzed the data I received from all the informants or participants of this study. When I was the one who asked them actually, may I please check your background? Because before they said, basta kanunulakay idi, compared gamin di lakay tata, this is also one thing na medyo magkakaiba, ada gamin tino, if we only base it by age, may mga matatanda rin kasi talaga na they're not really aware of the culture. Okay? Pero may mga bata naman, like mga 50s, na talagang they are really into their culture. Kaya tinanong ko, does age matter? Okay. Ang sabi ng head nila, before talaga, lahat ng nakita niya ay almost 70 pataas ang edad nila. But right now, when I was checking the members of the SANGO, when I had the study, may edad 60. May edad magsi-60 pa yung iba. But if you are going to ask them about the culture, they really knew what they were saying. Talagang well-versed sila because they have seen different practices in the community. And I also added wealth. Wala na daw yung concept na kapag ikaw yung mayaman, ikaw pa rin yung elder ng community. Yun ang sinabi nila. That's why I put there asterisk. And before, in Abra, that's why they call it lalakay. Apay nga lalakay, kat atamot tibakot nga kadwayo. And they said, women are now joining the SANGO. Okay, that's why in the SANGO system of Abra, we now, at least I had like 4 women member. And actually, one of them was a retired principal of a school. That's why I asked them the entry of educated people. When I'm educated there, they have the degree. They have the degree and they are now joining that. So it's actually very nice to see people trying also to integrate the gaps of gender in different institutions in our community. So I got all of them in summary. You should know how to really provide a judgment, carefully analyzing things. That's first. You should be aware of your culture across all things. And then you should be just nalintog. And then panakibulbulon, you should know how to lead by example in cases of occasions or any other festivities in the community. And then I asked them the second question. What are the types of conflict resolved in a SANGO? I was quite interested with the idea of murder, killing. If one is murdered, should we still resolve it within the level of the SANGO system? But yeah, I'm going to talk about that later. First is, we have the family conflict. Obviously, in the Cordillera, number 1, tidaga. Kaya idea titawid. In our culture in Abra, kapag bahay ang usapan, it should not be debated. Pupunta at pupunta yun sa youngest na lalaki. That's why our house ay sa father ko because he is the youngest. Hindi lang yung youngest. Must be the youngest na lalaki. Hindi po yun pinag-aawayan. Pero pagdating sa lupa, when it comes to the idea of tawid ng lupa, yun yung isang malaking problema sa pamilya. Right? Okay. Yung away kasi noon, naglalakan sila ng windows, door, wadan bakda, paidwan yung Facebook, man-block dalatan, kasi siya i-block da, kasi siya nag-upgrade. But anyway, they're still all family conflicts. And then we have the idea of matlang. When we say matlang, these are cases of adultery or concubinage, which is Very alarming because when I was comparing all my data, I came to realize that the number one case was matlang. Right. So I decided, I did not actually come up with a paper with that one, but I just decided to pursue that kind of thinking. Why? I asked them. Remember here in Daili, no dasok adasalaan. So kung nadadilalaki idi, uray kasatno kinadadayo na di sumaruno nga barangay, mapanda makisala. Kasjay ka no edi. And then later on, ejay nakisalaan da, they met someone, iso nga, anda nga ibagbaga nagsubli da, dagamti relationship da with others, and then all. But in our culture, medyo mahirap ang idea ng matlang because you will really be dealt swiftly. Parang siya ang pinaka-high ang punishment. Because among the Adasen, you would have to return everything, starting when you were courting her. Kung nagloko yung lalaki, starting when you were courting her, pag nilalayan sa sango, you will be there, the elders will settle that, ibabalik mo lahat, isublim, itaulim amin, ay ginasgastos mo. Taulim mo, may isang case, kasin ko, so, anya nga yung road, kat nagasto-gastusan ti manong nga baka, kat insubli na piman. Kasi binalik niya, and aside from that, pinakain niya pa yung community. Ganyan. And then iba pa yung damage. Pero sabi naman, kaya minsan mahirap yung case ng matlang sa amin, although kaya tinatago nila. Talagang tinatago nila. Kasi it's socially a taboo here in Cordillera naman talaga yung matlang. So that's the idea of matlang. So when they file a case, they call it talang. And then tuoy, when we say tuoy, sina. Or man siyan kayo. Right? Separation, that's why. Kapag dumating sa point na yan, I ask them, do we really need to go to up to that extent? Can we not prevent it, resolve it? Yes, the purpose of Sango is to supposedly prevent them from separation or getting separated from each other. But if we cannot really control the scenario and they would really wanted to be separated, then we have to go through with our indigenous way of dealing with them. Ibabalik mo din lahat ng gastos and then may fine pa siya and you would need to butcher at least one pig for those people who will be attending the resolution. And then of course, you have their tawid. Pero ngayon, sinabi ko, yung mga tawid pa, like for example, yung mga lupa, talagang indigenous way pa rin. May mga nagsabi, adangay gamintan nga mamatmati. Kaya minsan pumupunta pa rin sila sa korte pagdating sa lupa. So hindi ko pa pinurso yung side na yun. I just hope one day there will be some others to take a study on that. Or if I could, why not? All right, and then let's have the property-related conflicts. Tako, Aima, and Dirust. Tako is usually a term referred to kapag sa amin, kapag ang ninakaw mo ay hindi hayop, tako ang tawag namin. Kapag hayop, we have a different term. I'm really very sorry that I forgot because as of now, I keep talking to Kankanaey people. That's why I could now speak Kankanaey. And at some point in time, I tend to forget as well our language. Anyway, basta magkaiba ang takaw lang is applicable to all na ninakaw mo na hindi hayop. Pero pag hayop, iba ang tawag namin. And then we also have Aima. When we say Aima, dadaulum. Like, mabalinmot nga di animal mo, your animals destroyed the plantation, the karubam, that could still be resolved through a sango. And then we also have the dirus or yung agawan na talaga ng lupa. You just probably slept one night and then when you woke up early in the morning, your muhun suddenly moved, mga ganyan. Right? Mga ganyan po. Inaasikaso pa rin po ng elders. Pero ang lagi nilang sinasabi, so long as they will submit to us, that's why it's very important that we talk to them and we get their promise and we get their sapata that it should really be resolved within Sango, then we resolve them. Pero kung ayaw nila, it's up to them kasi meron namang, ang next kasi sa Sango ay yung lupong tagapamayapa headed by the barangay chairman. And then, one interesting is, we also have the petty crimes like suway or olot or pariri. Those are petty crimes na rin-resolve lang ng kahit isa daw na elder, pwede na, or through a process of negotiation lang, that could still be possible. Pero ang interesting ay yung idea ng heavy crime. Because there was one individual who was murdered. And I asked them, did you try to resolve it through your SANGO at least? They tried, according to the respondents, the participants, they tried to resolve that murder. Kasi it was really a murder kasi nakita ng buong barangay yung nangyari. They tried to resolve that. The family of the accused, yes. But for the family of the victim, hindi nila inaccept. They tried once, it failed, they did not do it again because the family of the victim did not accept. According to, kinausap ko yung parent ng victim. Sabi niya, ibang usapan kasi kapag patay. Like for the idea of stealing, when you stole probably isang bulig ng banana yan, you can just simply return it kapag meron ka. But life, you cannot really return it. So ibang usapan yon. So that's why I decided not to resolve and try it within the SANGO and forwarded it to the court. Ganun po yung nangyari dun sa cases ng patay. That's why I went back to my elder participants and asked them, may na-resolve na ba kayo sa level ng heavy crime like murder and all? Ang sabi nila, wala pa daw. Kasi kahit try nilang i-resolve at first, pumapayag daw ang both parties, but then later on, parang nagagaanan sila sa parusa kung magbabayad lang. Kasi yun lang naman ang pwedeng gawin because they could not return yung buhay. Kaya after that, hindi na lang sila bumabalik. Ang ginagawa ng mga members of the SANGO, they would draft a resolution, forward it to the lupong taga-mapayapa explaining that the case has been tried, however, it was not resolved and it was not amicably resolved. So bahala na si lupong taga-pamayapa, kung hindi pa kaya, that's the time daw na tataas po siya. Because I also talked to some members of the lupong taga-pamayapa to check the process. And then, we move on. So these are the different conflicts. So isa lang ang conclusion yan. All conflicts or crimes in the community, the elders are always willing to resolve it within the SANGO system so long as both parties would agree to resolve it amicably. But in cases where they won't agree, that's the time they would have to forward the case outside of the SANGO system. And then here, I have here some of the cases. Those are people who had cases I interviewed, right? We have Matlang, Tuhoy, Tawid. They are the people I talked to. I had a conversation with them. And I realized that you can really resolve them. Kasi kapag na-resolve mo yung conflict, ganito kasing idea ng ili namin, halos lahat kami magkakamag-anak. Parang ganyan. So if you could resolve it within the level of your community, the social bond, the unity, bumabalik din siya. Lalo no, if the season of agricultural planting is fast approaching, kailangan din kasi ang members of the community because of our innabuyog, the practice of letting other people of the community go and plant and then all. Otherwise, no, that they conflict you, it's gonna be a big problem because they will not going to help you. So mahalaga din na dapat nare-resolve and there should be a social order really in the community to make sure na kapag may mga activities like dagkasar, adanatayan, makitam daladta. Tano, adagamin ti apa yung nga na-resolve, usually napapansin ko hindi nagpapakita yung mga tao because they always have that hindi pa na-mend, hindi pa na-concealed na problema. And then results and discussions for the house or the ways and procedures of resolving the conflict through the SANGO system. We have the before and then the resolution during and then the after part of it. Now, of course, we really need complainant because there will be no SANGO if there's no complainant. In the same manner that there will be no case if there are no criminals and complainants. So we have first the complainant. If there's a problem, according to them, the complainant would have to approach the dadaulo or the head of the elders. And then the head of the elders will be the one. Kasi titignan niya rin po kasi, bakit you will need to choose them? I will need to choose who are the elders who will sit and resolve that case because it could be possible that one of the elders in the SANGO ay relative ng complainant or yung victim. So I would have to choose making sure na medyo malayo yung yung degree. So the elder will be the one to choose the members of the lalakay, and then after choosing the members of the lalakay, okay, they're going to schedule a certain amlangan. And then the elders would have to meet there, and then the head of the lalakay would have to narrate, describe to them the nature of the case, so that by the time they will be having the SANGO, everyone sitting would be aware of the case. So ganun po ang nangyayari sa kanya. And then after the amlangan, after they talk about the nature of the case, they will now inform the parties involved, parents and witnesses, if there are applicable, and then they will now have the SANGO scheduled on the other day or probably 2 days after the amlangan. So that's why usually members of the Council of the Elders leads through a prayer. Usually indigenous prayer po ito, like the Ugayam or the Dalang. This is also where I learned how to chant, because I have seen people before chanting at the time. So nadako mati problema ni Ma'am Mati ni Ma'am Briggs no panggap ti 10 hektarya ti daga kasi before you are going to start, you need to chant para ma-bless yung resolution itself. Ay, Ugayam, di alingan, ay umunangan tako kablaawan. Si kabunyan nga, nang dagupta, intakupan sa sangwan, problema di pagilyan, so on and so forth. Okay? Kasi ang problema sa amin, that's why they always put the idea of pagilyan is that the problem between two parties will always be a problem of the community. Na yun po ang titignan later on after ng process na ito. Then after that, after members of the council leads a prayer, kahit sino po sa kanila pwede daw, but usually linilid siya ng dadaulo nila or the chief. And then the chief will now describe the nature of the case, and then they will invite both parties. They would have to narrate the stories of the case. And then after narrating or hearing two parties, we will now proceed with the probing. The probing is very easy if the accused will always admit to his crime or to his sin. But it becomes quite more challenging if the accused would not admit it. That's where the idea of sapata would come in. So there will be a sapata. It will be done twice in the process. First is when you are probing so that someone will admit the case. After the sapata, then they will proceed with the idea of pamalakad, guiding the process for amicable agreement. All right. Since you already admitted the problem, then this is what we're going to do. Because the lalakay themselves could not impose their own decision. They will not hear both parties and then just simply impose their decision later on. They will just guide the two parties to arrive at a certain amicable agreement. So after that, they will provide some pamalakad or advice, and then after all the pamalakad and both parties would agree to let it be settled amicably, then they will now read the katulagan or the agreement signed by all the participants. Since you agreed to this, then we are now going to provide you the letter, the katulagan, the agreement, and both of you must sign that this conflict has already been resolved under the level of the SANGO system, and there should be no other cases to be filed, a separate case to be filed in the lupon ng lupong tagapamayapa ng barangay. And then after that, they will conduct again they will do again another sapata. This sapata is different from the first sapata. This sapata is now for both parties who affixed their signature in the katulagan to honor the responsibilities. I ask one, was there at least one instance where sapata had taken place when you were probing? And one of them answered, babae po yung sumagot, yes, I've witnessed one. there was this old lady who was accused of stealing vegetables daw. And then they filed the case through the SANGO of the lalakay. And then when they were asking her, she kept denying the accusation. That's why, to probe, they asked her to do the sapata. Ang sinabi niya daw nung nagsapata siya, uray no dumakkel daytoy tiyan ko no siyak tinag-ala. I do not really know if this is incident lang ba na talaga incident lang siya na talagang nangyari or the sapata itself was very effective. Sabi niya, after a week, bumabalik siya sa amin kasi lumalaki yung tiyan niya. So, kaya sabi nila, mula nung time na yun, mas dumali yung pag-investigate namin ng problem kasi natatakot sila sa idea of sapata. Ganyan. Otherwise, it's very, very nakakatakot din talaga kapag you are trying to invite curse to yourself or within yourself. Like, usually before, even if I'll get struck by a lightning, if I did that, even one of my family members would die if I did that, all of those things, something na hindi mo talaga pwedeng sabihin, supposedly, kasi you're attracting it. So, nangyari daw yun, one of the cases, and after that, may tinanong ako, after that case kasi usually, hindi kami dumadaan sa sapata. Kung may witness na, inaamin na nila. Pero kahit may witness, kung ayaw nilang aminin, we are really forced to do the sapata. Ganyan. Right, so the sapata there is both now the parties will be honoring kung ano ang napag-agrian. All right, ibabalik mo yung kalabaw na binenta mo na hindi namin alam, and at the same time, magpakain ka, at the same time, you're also going to pay. If you are the accused accepting all of those because you are now guilty, then definitely you would have to take the sapata, honoring your responsibilities, that after this sango, I would have to make sure that I will honor all my responsibilities. I'll feed the community or just the people who attended the sango. I'm going to return the carabao and all other things that I am required to do as a result of my wrongdoings. Para pong ganyan. And then after that, after the sapata, we'll do again the patigmaan. Kapag nagsapata na siya, all right. Balating na yung mga elders to provide them some sort of advice not to do this again. Right? And ito na rin yung time na sa may patigmaan and advice, this is also the time where both parties, specifically the accused, no, lalo na siya, magsosorry siya, trying to restore the social disorder he caused in the community. Hindi lang siya magsosorry doon sa tao, pati sa community. That is the very essence why we have the idea of panangan. Panangan is now trying to restore your broken relationship with the community para bumalik yung order, yung social order. The amigos, obviously, parang Espanyol yan. Nagtatanong ako ng ibang term pero ang alam talaga ng mga elders ay amigos talagang sinasabi. Lahat sila amigos po ang sinabi nila. What is amigos anyway? After that, the two parties would have to shake their hands and then wine, especially yung wine daw, ibubuhos sa kanilang kamay while they are shaking so that the warmness of that wine should also be the same with the warmness of their relationship after the sango. Parang ganyan. Para bumalik yung init ng kanilang pagmamahalan siguro, ganun. Yung relationship nila with each other. And then after doing that, they will now set up for the panangan. So panangan, including those people who are there, kung meron pang ibang darating, they will all have to eat. At very deep ang meaning ng panangan dito because you could really see whether the accused or the victim has forgiven the accused. Nung nagsango dati may sanga table, you could really see the connection. Mabalin. Ngumno, pag dito daw yung accused, tapos yung victim ayaw pumunta siya doon, meron pa ring problema na kailangang dagdagan pa ng advice ng mga elders hanggang ma-mend yung broken relationship. So it's the idea of eating together. You could see unity. You could see forgiveness. They're trying to restore it. Because your problem to that person is also a problem you cause to the entire community. Ganun po yung process niya during. And after that, of course, kailangan po nating tingnan if the accused really honored all the responsibilities during the sango and in the written agreement they signed. So they have the multa or fines or dusa. The aggrieved party gives the fines agreed upon during the SANGO. It will be monitored by one assigned member who will receive the fine. Respondent's failure to honor responsibilities, ifo-forward po yung case as unresolved pa rin siya. Okay. So pero kapag na-resolve naman siya, pag binigay po, member gives the fines to the victims, then the Council of Elders will forward a copy of settlement duly attested by all the members of the punong barangay of the community that the case has already been settled. Pero hanggat hindi na-honor nung accused, yung gumawa ng kasalanan, yung mga responsibilities niya, there will be no case forwarded to the punong barangay that the case has been settled. Kapag in-honor na niya, then they will draft a letter, this case has already been resolved. Kapag hindi naman pupunta sa lupong taga-pamayapa, it's now their burden to resolve the problem. Kung hindi po talaga nila kaya, sabi nila, inaakyat nila sa mayor's office or even sa court talaga yung kaso. Pag hindi naman lang yung medyo malaki-laking kasalanan yung ginagawa nila. So I realized that before, isa sa mga reason daw why this is still functional, going back to the framework I used, is because it is beneficial to the community. And at the same time, I asked them, why do we still need to have this when in fact we have your barangay councils and all to settle them, you are not receiving your salary and all. Definitely, if you are part of this community, you've grown here, you were raised here, then you should have understand the culture and life. It would be very tiring to go to Bangged or other places just for you to file a case. You travel every now and then, specifically so na wala namang jeep sa amin ngayon. Talagang walang jeep na nagta-travel kasi sa amin. Unlike before na merong pa isa-isa, ngayon medyo nawala after the pandemic, mahirap daw yung travel. Hindi lang yung physical body mo, it requires financial din, mapapagod yung bulsa mo, and then all, the lawyers will get your money, and then you go there to follow up, wala pa rin nangyayari, all of those things. Yung mga minention nila, why it remains functional and existing in our community. So I just really hope, because iba na rin kasi ngayon, kahit kasi malayo yung lugar namin, yung mga kabataan ngayon, iba na rin. They're not really aware of this. So, medyo I was quite laughing every time na nakikita ko sa Facebook. Kapag may problema, they're posting it on Facebook instead of consulting the elders or their parents. And then itagda pa Rafi Tulfo in action, kung nadahan nga SANGO or the barangay and all. So, there are some changes probably. Like, isa pa sa mga changes niya before ay ngayon, ay yung pagpasok din ng religion. Na dati, ag-ugayam da, agdalung da, but now, ag-prayer dalagtan ti Christian, kasjay. But there are still elders na talagang nag-ugayam during resolution. So yun po yung entire na concept ng SANGO sa amin. It is an institution established by the lalakay, all the elders, to resolve conflict existing within our community to the best of their knowledge and then capability. So, yan po yung Adasen SANGO system from Abra. Thank you so much for listening.